Hello everyone, and welcome to the first in a series of tutorials on Total War 3 Kingdoms. This game does have a rather steep learning curve, and it can be somewhat difficult to get to grips with, especially if you've never played any of the Total War titles before. It can come across as fairly overwhelming and off-putting to some people. That being said, I do think it's worth the effort to get to grips with, as I feel like Creative Assembly really outdid themselves with this title. It's by far my favourite in the series, and I often feel it doesn't get enough love compared to the other Total War games. Last note before we begin, there is a Chinese audio option over here in the audio options, which will essentially make all of the dialogue from the characters in game they'll be speaking Chinese, and it'll have English subtitles, including the advisor. I personally prefer this option, just because I feel it just feels a little bit more authentic. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I have turned that off, and we will be using the English audio option instead. I feel as though particularly the advisor's speech will be easier to comprehend and understand for a complete beginner if it's spoken in English, as this tutorial is also done in English. So without further ado, let's jump into a new game. Okay, so first of all, the game will recommend a number of characters to you. It's basically the Three Kingdoms factions: Liu Chong for some reason, Gongsun Zhen, and Meng Huo. Now, if you haven't got the Furious Wilds DLC, Meng Huo probably won't be there. The Three Kingdoms factions, as well as the other two, I wouldn't necessarily recommend trusting the game's assessment of the starting situation. It says that Cao Cao is easy and Liu Chong is easy, at least in my playthroughs with these two, which granted were on very hard or legendary. It was not very easy at all to start as these two factions. I've not yet played Liu Bei, so I can't really comment on whether it's normal or not. Sun Jian, though, I think is probably the easiest. And you see this with the AI as well. Almost every time you start a game, by the time you get to the Three Kingdoms period, Sun Jian will be one of the more powerful factions, and you're probably going to have to deal with him. If you're playing as him, he has quite a lot of lands in the south where he's not being constantly attacked by enemies. He does have a story war with Liu Biao, which you don't necessarily have to participate in, but the game does kind of nudge you that way. So if you're looking for the easiest possible start, I would probably recommend Sun Jian. For the purposes of this tutorial, we are going to be playing Shi Xie. Now, Shi Xie is included in the base game, but unless you have the Furious Wilds DLC, or at least this unique character model and his unique faction features, etc., were released with the Furious Wilds DLC, your game experience may be a little bit different, and I'm not sure that he's actually included as a playable character in the base game. So, with Shi Xie, first of all, we will look at our location on the map. We're going to be down here, essentially in the Southlands. That is Sun Jian. All of this near the beginning of the game is more or less desolate. You can colonize it. This is why I think Sun Jian is a fairly easy start. But back to Shi Xie. We will be surrounded by enemies on our borders. We will have very hostile tribes to the left, or to the west, I suppose, and to the north. The reason I've selected Shi Xie for this particular tutorial is because I am currently doing a campaign as Shi Xie on my live streams, and so I'm up to speed with his faction mechanics and understand the starting situation and everything. It's a bit more fresh in my memory than the other factions, though we will be covering them later on in the series. With this particular game, and with most Total War games, each faction does have unique features, so it's worth taking note of them because they will impact your playstyle if you're intending to get the most out of a particular faction. For Shi Xie, it's going to be tribute chests, which described as a set of ancillaries exclusive to this faction. Tribute chests confer powerful bonuses to the characters to whom they are equipped. And the kind of lore behind this is Shi Xie is known for lavish gifts and tributes. These offerings have the power of motivating even the weakest minds into decisive action. He also has Bonds of Family, which is essentially his focus on nepotism. It's a passive effect and it reduces the cost of marrying and adopting characters. The lore behind that is, in the far south, far from the capital, there is nothing more important than a strong, powerful family. Now this will also tie into the Splendor, which essentially increases trade influence and public order, as well as diplomatic relations. It's a very powerful, unique feature to have once you're in the top tier, which is godlike Splendor. You can spend it to gain tribute chests, which costs, I believe it's 65 per chest, and they provide powerful bonuses to generals and characters, and also can be traded in diplomacy as bronze objects. For anyone who's unfamiliar with that, a bronze boarded object in diplomacy will usually be worth around 2.2 in values to the AI. That may not make a lot of sense just now, but we will get into that as soon as we start the campaign. He does also have loyalty to the Han, because he's a governor faction. Here he's part of the Empire. So what that means is you cannot become Emperor by declaring yourself Emperor in the way that the Warlords can, including Cao Cao, Liu Bei and Sun Jian, who would declare themselves the Kingdom of Wei, Kingdom of Shuhan and the Kingdom of Wu. But you can, once a Warlord has declared themselves Emperor, essentially take over their Emperor's seat and declare yourself Emperor, or at least King, that way. And the law behind that is ambition is tamed by respect and loyalty towards the Han and its emperors. So, if we go to the character panel for Shi Xie, we will see that he has a number of traits. Now, traits are variable between characters. Some characters have more traits, some have less traits. Quite often, the traits that characters gain will be influenced by your actions in the campaign. So, for example, if a character is wounded in battle but not killed, they may get a trait called Maimed, which would give them various effects, and so on and so forth. It can also be influenced by certain events, your choices in certain events, as well as your overall playstyle. Shi Xie is a strategist, and the description of a strategist by the game is able to severely impair the efficiency of enemy units and generals in the battle. They also provide use of formations to nearby friendly units, however they are extremely fragile, best grouped with retinues of ranged infantry. Now, strategists are very, very useful in this game, particularly for archers and missile units. Their main stat, which we'll get to, is Cunning, which essentially gives an ammunition boost. They provide you with many complex formations that can help you essentially turn the tide in battles and be the difference between winning and losing. Now, this I don't believe is this is not universal to strategists, but this is just as particular unique buffs. Minus 10 recruitment cost for ranged units and +1 available trade agreements. That is going to be very important in the early game. To go back to his traits, his modesty will give him a buff 2 to cunning and 6 to authority. What that means essentially is authority governs things. If it's your faction leader or your heir or prime minister, it will govern things like satisfaction in the field of battle. It will govern morale. Commanders, if the general is a commanding general of the army, which again is something we'll get into, it will do the whole army. If it's just a general within the army, then it'll only do his retinue. Again, this will make a little bit more sense once we get into the game. He's also charitable, gives him 4 resolve, that's essentially health, and gives him a little bit more authority. Very nice. If your faction leader has a lot of authority, it means your people are likely to be more satisfied. That retinue upkeep is actually quite nice as well under modest there. It will help to It will help us to build our first army. He is scholarly, so that gives him +4 expertise. That's essentially, if you think about it in RPG terms, it's like your agility. It basically helps with melee evasion, and it also has some useful buffs to administrators. The 4 cunning, again, useful for range units, useful in some ways for administration as well, and it also allows character experience, the scholarly trait does. You'll see these small ticks under these traits from Shi Xie as well, telling you what he likes and does not like. Loathes arrogance, commends honour, loathes greed, and so on. This is part of the Guanxi system that Creative Assembly implemented into this game. It depends on the compatibility of traits and what they like and dislike as to whether characters will get along. Sometimes it can be useful to have characters that don't get along within the same army or within the same area, because they'll become rivals. They'll push each other to essentially be stronger and do more. But as a rule of thumb, it's usually best to try and get generals that or characters that like each other and have similar traits to be around each other quite often. In that sense, you get various buffs and different relationship events that happen between them. It's quite a nice feature, actually. The final thing we'll do before we jump into the campaign is just go through the character background of Shi Xie. Shi Xie has wisely and insidiously kindled the favour of the Han, for he is cunning of mind and a barrier against threats from distant lands. His rise was won through the strength of his family's deep and noble lineage, and not insignificant personal favours to the powerful Shi Xie. And not insignificant personal favours to the powerful. Shi Xie benevolently welcomes the needy and destitute to his lands, all the while planting his own family members into positions of power. For as surely as Shi Xie gives generously, he also takes advantageously. We will be playing this on Romance mode. I will also be playing this on, we're going to play it on Legendary, and we're going to have no limit on battles. We're not going to do timeless characters. This essentially stops your characters from dying of old age. I find that to be entirely immersion breaking. I understand why some people like it. Sometimes it's a real letdown when you have a great character you've been working on for the entire game and then they just die at age 60 or something. So I do understand why people would like this. Again, up to you if you want to put that on. Personally, I am going to leave it off. I would rather my characters die at a reasonable age, even if it's somewhat detrimental. The campaign on your end might be a little bit different if you don't have it set to Legendary, because Legendary difficulty is very, very difficult. It also removes the aspect of quick saves. So quick saves are essentially, you can press Control and S and save the campaign at any point. You can't do that if it's on Legendary difficulty. I think being on Legendary and actually having some challenges in front of us though will help with the tutorial, because I am going to have to actually think about how to get out of particular predicaments. We will be starting at 190 CE, which is Rise of the Warlords. It's essentially the moments after Dongzhuo steals the Emperor and the Warlords begin to rise against him and against the Han. If you would like to know more about that, please check out my lore video, which I've posted to this channel under a separate playlist. And if you would like to see the Shi Xie campaign on my live stream, you can check me out on Twitch as well. Now, with all of that out of the way, we'll jump into the game.
Embers rise, stark against the night. The tyrant Dongzhuo wields the flames of destruction. Luoyang burns, chaos ignites, as the power of the eunuchs is crushed. In the pyre, the Han falters. Yet the fire that ignites the turmoil also enkindles the fires of hope. They stoke the light of a determined spirit. May this fierce resolve lead to a brighter future for China.
It has been 3 years, Shi Xie, since you were appointed administrator of Jiaosi. Thereafter, chaos has only grown across the Empire. And yet, it must be defended.
You cannot idly watch as upstarts claw at the fabric of the nation. The warlords of Yulin, Gaoliang, or Zuzhen have displayed an insolence. They should be defeated. With your power thus proven, you should look to your own realm. You rule over a vast area. But these southern lands are in need of development and administration. Your kin will make wise leaders, should they wish it. Under your tutelage, you will form solid foundations from which to build a lasting kingdom. Also, you must be wary of the tribes across the border. Most of the larger groups show wisdom. It is possible they could be pacified with words, not steel. Yet beware of King Mulu near your borders. He resists all overtures. However you proceed, Shi Xie, hold your duty firmly in your mind. You are named by the Emperor himself as the one who will bring peace to the south.
Okay, so thank you very much, Advisor. We'll get rid of you. So, ruler of the Southern Lands. You have been appointed as the ruler of Jiaozi Commandery. While this is certainly an honour, this territory is far from the Han government and far from inspectors and far from your culture. Many would consider this nomination a veiled insult, but truly there is boundless opportunity. You can use this land and its remoteness to create your own empire within an empire and secure a future of the Shi family for generations to come. The objectives related to this particular event are appoint family members to positions of power to generate Splendor, which is up here, and let Splendor accumulate for faction-wide bonuses or use it to purchase tribute chests, powerful ancillaries that give strong bonuses to characters when equipped. So you see, well, actually, we'll go through the mission issued. Family in high places, this far away from the Han central government, and this deep into strange lands. It is paramount that you have people you trust in positions of power, and for that, members of your family are by far the most suitable candidates available. And the objective related to this mission is to assign Shi to an administrative post. And the reward is Path of Glory, which will give us 4k population growth, which helps with peasantry income and replenishment, plus 5 public order, and plus 20% income from peasantry. So that's 2 nice peasantry income bonuses we'll get there. And the little caption there is, you are on the path to glory and inspire your people. So lovely. We want to inspire our people, of course, and we certainly want to be on the path to glory. Now, first of all, the Splendor mechanic that is unique to this faction. You will see that you have unnoticeable at the minute, which is the bottom tier. You see these black lines in between. At the minute, we don't have enough Splendor to purchase tribute chests. It tells you there that the Splendor is generated by assigning family members to core positions and having family members leading other factions, i.e. through vassals. Your domain holds few beauties and riches. Those who pass through it will leave unimpressed, and those who do not come will never hear of it. The second level to that is Dazzling. You have enough Splendor to purchase 1 tribute chest. It gives you plus 10 trade influence only when you're within this zone. If you purchase the tribute chest and fall back into this zone, you lose the 10% trade influence buff. And this one is, your domain is impressive to behold. It is a veritable hub of trade, culture and study. Those who inhabit it observe it with reverence, and your land draws in immigrants and passers-by in droves. So that's nice. Now, the last tier in the Splendor chain is Godlike. This is where we want to stay. First of all, it gives plus 10 satisfaction. That is very, very useful, particularly on legendary difficulty, but even on the easier settings. When you first start, satisfaction can be very difficult to manage. Now, this gives you enough Splendor to purchase multiple tribute chests. Typically, if this is full, you'll be able to purchase 2 and stay within the top tier. Then you'll have to wait for it to regenerate before you can purchase any more. Of course, the +5 public order is lovely, and the +25 trade influence is nice as well. Your domain is of legendary beauty and affluence. Those who pass through it rarely leave, and your legend will echo through the ages. So that's nice. We certainly want our legend to echo through the ages. Now, to explain a couple of the little widgets that we have on the opening screen. First of all, this thing flashing up here is the info overlay. This will basically give you a rundown of what everything does. I will be doing that anyway, so I'm not going to bother going through what the game tells you, but you can get some more information on the various panels by clicking on this. This will bring up your menu. It's basically your save menu, your escape menu. You can save, load, etc. and everything else through that, as well as change various things like the graphics, audio, whatever you like really, to your settings menu. This one is Total War Academy. That's will essentially bring up a window in Steam. I'm not sure whether that will be captured as part of this, but if you click on that, it will bring up a window basically where you can look at the videos that the developers have made to try and show you the basics of how to play the game. Hopefully you won't need that after you've watched this one. Now, the first couple of things, you've got the year number up here and the turn number. So we're in Harvest 190 on turn 1. Each of the 5 seasons affects the land and battles in different ways. So for example, we're in Harvest, so we are fairly generic in terms of the battlefield. When this changes to summer, it will get hotter, things will look a little bit more vibrant. Autumn and winter, particularly winter, will be colder. You'll have snow to deal with. It can have some speed debuffs and some fatigue and morale debuffs as well, depending on the faction. Of course, here we have our income. This scales with the difficulty level. So you will start off with more gold and usually more income the lower difficulty that you're on, and the higher the difficulty setting, the less that you start off with. But it's essentially your starting income. There's nothing really too complicated about that. You can, however, go to your Treasury and you can see some in-depth information about where your money's going, how you're getting it in, things like that. And when you rank up a little bit, you can change your taxes and everything, which will affect this. Now, the 2,000 is what you have available to you right now. The in green in brackets, or here in green in brackets, is essentially your income expected next turn. It is, I believe, an estimate. Sometimes that doesn't reflect the entire amount, but it's usually a very, very good indicator. Here you have your food, and it'll tell you there your consumption and production of food, as well as how that affects the reserves and income from peasantry in your commanderies. So in your commanderies you have reserves, which are essentially good for restocking your military supplies, and also will help if your settlement is put under siege. It essentially governs how long or how many turns you can hold out against the siege without suffering attrition. The higher your reserves, the longer you can hold out. For me personally, I tend not to focus on this too much. Usually if the AI attacks your city, it's because it believes it can overwhelm the forces that you have there, and it probably won't allow you to start suffering attrition. In some cases it makes sense to try and build this up, but generally speaking it's not of massive concern, at least not for me. The last thing on the little widgets or the little icons we've got here are your resources. So we've currently acquired by territory, rice and fishing. Those are things essentially that we can trade with other factions. Different settlements give different resources. For example, here we have a rice paddy, and here we have fish, which is where we're getting that from. You can also, on your map, put the filter on to show... Oh no, you can't actually on this. I'm thinking of the older Total War games. You actually could show a resource filter on the map to show where these settlements are. It's not too complicated to figure out. You can see little icons for what each settlement will give you. For example, these are cities or towns. This is a port. That is spice, or a spice market. So it's fairly self-explanatory in terms of what you can get from the different settlements. Not difficult to figure out. The three icons that we have down here, first of all, are the faction unique, I suppose you would call it, buffs and debuffs. Crossroads of Culture and Commerce, minus 10 satisfaction for non-family members. That's not particularly good. Like we mentioned earlier on, the satisfaction is fairly difficult to manage in the early game. Anything that makes that harder is going to make things a lot harder for you. The good news is that we do get 15% income from silk and 15% income from spice. That's nice because we happen to be in the spice capital of China, so I'm sure that will come in handy. We currently have low satisfaction, as you would expect when you start off on legendary difficulty. Usually you will have low satisfaction of some kind. So that comes with a debuff for minus 25% character experience, minus formulary supplies, and plus 15% corruption. And it says you have more generals with very low satisfaction than those with very high satisfaction. The resulting negative sentiment is causing disruption. So that's unfortunate. To go over to generals, we've got the character panel here. You can use Control and F2 or just click the little icon there. You've got the faction leader, Shi Xie. You've got his brother, I believe. Just check the family tree. Yeah, his brother or brother-in-law. No, probably his brother. Essentially, he is a complacent administrator, and he's a level 3 sentinel though, so that is nice. We'll explain the different character classes in just a moment. We've also got a champion, Shi Xie, which is our son, and a commander, Shi Xie, who is one of the people who's not particularly happy. If we look at his satisfaction, you just hover over the little angry face there, and you can see that he's got plus 25 innate satisfaction. That's nice. Plus 4 authority for people in power. We'll get to that when we look at the stats. And minus 10 general discontent. Now the general discontent, I believe, comes from the difficulty setting. Once you get to hard difficulty and beyond, your characters will all have that minus 10 as standard, just to make things a little bit more challenging. We've also got Lady Shi, who is our wife. She's fairly happy. She's not ecstatic, but she is more satisfied because she's married into the ruling family, and she's still got that innate satisfaction buff. And Zhong Min, he is not very happy at all. Well, he's not happy because he's not part of our family, which comes from this debuff, and he has general discontent but also lack of purpose. Now, what happens when characters are left basically doing nothing? They start to get this lack of purpose debuff. Now, you can counteract that by using assignments, is one of the ways. Send them on an assignment. For example, he has the ability to get Stimulate Markets, which is 75% income from Commerce, Silk and Spice in the local commandery, meaning if I sent him to do that in Hapu, we would get 75% more Commerce, Silk and Spice in Hapu, and he would also lose the lack of purpose debuff. I don't believe he had a lack of purpose. No, he didn't, and neither did she. Now, she's got the same assignment as him. He can give peasantry income. At the minute, we can only do one assignment anyway. Now, you can see here there are a number of other assignments that these characters may be able to offer, but you need to rank them up and give them the correct skills in order to unlock them. And so that brings us on essentially to the skill tree and the character stats. You can right click on a character on the panel on the right hand side, and it'll bring up this table of information. So you've got obviously the character name and their title, as well as the lovely art, their level, and what type of character they are. There are 5 different types, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5 different types of character. This is their upkeep, so this is how much they're taking out of your treasury per turn, essentially. This is past loyalties, so it basically tells you who they've worked for and who they currently work for. Now, this is usually the most useful to try and combat spies. Quite often you will get spies from other factions, and if they're working for or have worked very recently for a faction that you're very unfriendly with, and they don't hold a grudge against that faction, it's likely that they're probably a spy. This will tell you their job, basically. So general, it will either say general, administrator, prime minister, whatever position you put them in. This is their title or their character type. So it tells you here that Shi Xie is a legendary character, gives you a rundown of his current experience and how much he needs to level up. So we need about double what we've got at the minute to level up. It says this character is of legendary repute. Now you can tell that by the name, the fact that his name is in gold, whereas his, for example, is just in white. That will let you distinguish quite easily whether they're legendary or not, and of course it does say legendary there, and for him it just says champion, or in his case, strategist versus legendary strategist. Now the difference with legendary characters are that they get resilient. Well, in fact, we'll go down the list of differences here. So we've already gone through the definition of a strategist in the opening. Under Governor Shi, so this is his personal character buffs. He has plus 20 cunning, plus 20 authority, and plus 1 resilience. Most legendary characters will have at least plus 1 resilience. That means if they're killed in battle, they will instead be wounded, and they'll replenish next turn, and you can use them again, with the exception of if they're captured, for example, and the enemy choose to execute them, they will still die immediately. He also gives, we've gone through the -10 recruitment cost and the trade agreement. It gives you 2 of his likes down there as well. And it says, with his long and distinguished record of sophisticated service, Shi Xie is destined for stately eminence. So we've gone through the basics in terms of what the character tree is made up of. We've already covered his traits. This one, Brilliant, is very, very good. As you can see, it gives you plus 15% ammunition for all units, as well as minus 30 ammunition for enemy units, plus 10 income from all sources. It does increase ambition to gain independence, but as he's the faction leader, he's got independence anyway. The 5 different stats are also aligned with the 5 different types of generals. For example, Sentinels are usually geared around expertise, and you can see that with the purple colour code. There is a nice story behind the colour coding in this game, which we will probably get to in one of the lore videos in future, but for now it's easy enough just to remember that basically purple goes with purple, and green goes with green, and blue goes with blue, etc. There are some exceptions that you probably will have to make out of necessity, but the same goes for your buildings. As you can see here, you've got a blue building and a green building, and that typically tells you that this is linked to the strategist or liquid in the way that the skill tree is set up. It's usually commerce income or something like related to that. This, for example, with it being green, will usually be related to food or something loosely related to agriculture and farming and things like that. The buildings and the characters are not particularly that important, though they do have some roles to play if you assign a character as an administrator, which again we'll get to shortly. So, if we open up Shi Xie again, we'll go through his stats. Expertise is, you can see there, it gives you plus melee evasion the higher it gets. It also gives you -7 construction costs in the administrated commandery, so that's how it can be useful. In terms of an administrator, if you've got a sentinel as an administrator, it can help you with building buildings quite significantly, especially in the early game. Resolve will give you plus 1k population growth, which will help with replenishment, as well as peasantry income, and will also add to the general's health. Champions tend to be very good at this. This is why, obviously, they're colour-coded green. They tend to have the highest resolve, which also makes them fairly good in duels, though the game suggests that champions are usually the best in one-on-one duels and sentinels are the best at fighting other troops. I tend to find that sentinels are pretty much beasts in duels, to be honest with you, but we'll get to all of that later on anyway. The Cunning Stat is which is what Shi Xie is particularly gifted in, and most strategists will have this as their primary stat. It essentially governs the amount of ammunition that their retinue has. So a retinue is his group of soldiers. You see he's got 2 lots of crossbowmen. We will be replacing them, and I'll get to why in a moment. But he's got 2 lots of crossbowmen. Now their ammunition,
the bows hang heavy,
is here. It's listed as 23. It's difficult to know what kind of quantity that is, but the higher it is, the better, basically. If we were to give it to him, or him, for example, they would not have as high ammunition, therefore would not be able to shoot as many arrows, and will be less useful in battle. You've got Instinct, which is the Vanguard primary skill, and we don't actually have any Vanguards to show off at the minute, I don't think. Yes, we do. Sai Mao. So Kai Mao is a Vanguard, which is why he's coloured red. His main skill, although we can't say it at the minute because we don't know him, will be Instinct, and this is basically, it represents fire in the way that it's set up in game, and it basically is damage. It's like damage output. Authority, we briefly covered in the introduction, but since we're going through the skills, we'll go over it a little bit here as well. It gives, if you're faction leader, prime minister, or heir, so if it's authority of somebody in a particular office of power within the faction, it can give a satisfaction boost. It's very good. We want our people in positions of power to have as much authority as we possibly can to basically to try and keep everyone happy. And this is why you also see on their satisfaction buffs +4 for authority from people in power. It's because he's got quite high authority stat. It also gives +3 unit morale on retinue. Now, I did say previously with commanders it applies to the whole army, but I am mistaken. It actually still only applies to their retinue, even with a commanding general. You can get some skills that buff the entire army when you're in a commanding role, but the authority stat itself actually just does your retinue, so your group of soldiers. Ideally, that's usually useful to have authority and resolve in your frontline troops because you want them to be able to take a lot of battering, and you also don't want them to run away. If the morale reduces below 0, your troops will run away basically and get slaughtered by the enemy. It's probably the worst thing that can happen in a battle, really. On the left hand side we have his ancillaries or items. So he has a Heavenly Sword. That's a very nice starting ancillary. And I did mention previously that the tribute chests are gold framed. This is a silver framed object, so this basically tells you that it's a tier above what the tribute chests would be, which, because we can't, oh yeah, you can kind of see it there. Around the trader's chest is bronze, and that's the same with all of these different chests, which we'll get into when we can actually purchase them. Here is Shi Xie's armor. Now, because he's a unique character, he has unique armor, but if you look at the likes of Shi Xie, he does not. He just has the generic hunter's garb, and you can change this between different styles. This is something that I actually really like that they implemented into the game, is the ability to customize your generals to some degree at least. One other thing of mention is the title system. So this can give, let's go to somebody who's not particularly happy. Let's choose him. So if we take his title and we give him, instead of nothing, we call him a senior officer.
As soldiers fall,
that is going to give plus 200% character salary. So we're going to be spending more money on him, but it's going to give him plus 25 satisfaction. So you see straight away he now is much more happy because he has a promotion and salary. As you can also see, our income dropped quite significantly. We wouldn't normally give him that title, but for the time being, in fact, I'm going to take that off him. It's just essentially to show you how that works, and he's now down to 9 because he's been recently demoted as well. So that's unfortunate for Shi Xie. To go back to the character panel, you also have the horse of the general or character that you are looking at, which will be different depending on what kind of general they are. Strategists, usually they start off with a default black horse, which is common, and usually the best horses to give them are horses that buff their cunning skill, which usually are black horses. There are some unique mounts which aren't necessarily black, but typically speaking, you're going to be looking at giving a black horse to a strategist, a grey horse which buffs expertise to a sentinel, a white horse which buffs authority to a commander, and they're both strategists as well. The follower is, we don't actually have any at the minute, but they are basically, let's see if we can look at any in diplomacy. The Han Empire probably have some.
Glad to see.
No, they don't. Of course they don't. Let's see then if Dongzhuo does.
What?
Yeah, here we go. He's got quite a good one actually. So this is one of the followers. You get hundreds of different types, and it basically gives them an additional boost as well as additional effect, and it's essentially part of their entourage that follows the general around. We don't have any unique weapons either, but I believe he did.
What
No,
shall
he
we
didn't,
discuss
but it
today?
was the Han Empire that did.
Welcome.
Yeah, so these
friend.
weapons, in the same way as the armor, which we actually have quite a few of, you can give these to generals to increase their stats. It's very helpful in duels, and it makes them look a little bit cooler as well. So we'll close that, and we'll actually look at this armor that we've got, since we're speaking about items at the minute. We had a champion's armor. Now, the other thing is as well, this was a source of great frustration for me when I first started this game. For example, I would have one of these, and I would be perplexed as to why I could not put this on my general. This may be obvious to many people, but it was mainly the commander and sentinel armors that I was having a lot of difficulty with. But in case it isn't obvious to anyone, as it wasn't obvious to me, the items with the green tint or the green name, you see here, click on that, you've got a little green icon up there and a little blue icon up there. That basically means this can be worn by champions. This is a good example actually of one with a red and green icon, which means it can be worn by either champions or by vanguards. So we will actually put that on him, make him look a little bit cooler, and we don't really have any good weapons to give him, so that's fine. We don't have any followers. We do have an ancillary here, which is a stone pig. This will give him 6 satisfaction and 6 instinct, so we'll give him that as well. As I said, instinct is your damage output, so there we've reduced his expertise, but champions don't need a lot of that anyway, so they rely on their health, their tanks, as opposed to agility builds. So we've taken down his expertise and his speed a little bit, but we have given him a massive charge bonus, well, a fair charge bonus, and also a lot more health, and we've given him a lot more damage output there as well. Yeah, his traits, he's got careless, which isn't great, but it's, yeah, for a champion you can get away with it. He's got intrepid and loyal, but if you look at his likes and dislikes, they actually they actually line up fairly well with Shi Xie, which is why you see this here. Shi Xie he likes, and we're not getting a comment apparently on from Shi Xie, but he likes both of them. This is why you've got the little tick there. So the first thing, the mission that we had to do was to assign Shi Xie to an administrator post. Now, if we look at, you can do this one or two ways. You can either look at the buffs if you go on the administrator panel, which is this down here, this little head. You can look at what this particular character would do in this commandery. So commandery is like a city or an area. It'll tell you basically that he will, this is the basic buffs that you will get from putting any administrator there, and this is the unique buffs that any particular character will give you. So he will give -7% to construction cost, she will give -5 to construction cost, he will give -2. If we look at Shi Xie, who is the person we're actually going to put in this post, he will give -26 construction cost, +5 public order, and +10 income from commerce, silk and spice. And you can see here as well, if you hover over the gold in your settlement or city, you can see where your income is coming from and choose the best administrator based on that. So we'll get him in there. And actually, that was a bit of a mistake because I would have liked to give him a full retinue before we did that. Let's go through those missions after we applied him, after we assigned him as an administrator. Developing the south. This land is underdeveloped and barren. While some may feel that it's an assignment to a remote place, like this is a punishment, there is opportunity here to create a strong dynasty of your own. One that can build these lands up and rule them from a position of knowledge. And we got support from merchants, which is plus 10% income from commerce. Faction wide, we don't have a tremendous amount of commerce income right now, so it hasn't really made that much difference. This is where you can view the ancillaries that you gained. We've already gone through them. This will tell you the appointments, so in fact we've put him in the administrator post. We will also, we've got the most commerce income here, so what we'll do is we'll get him, since he has lack of purpose, and we'll set him, although he might be about to leave, but we'll see. Let's see what... It might actually be worth just getting rid of him. Yeah, he doesn't give a great deal. He does have this night battles ability though, which is nice. It also gives you fire arrows.
Destroy corruption.
Which Shi Xie apparently doesn't have. Which means we can't shoot fire. Right. What we're going to do then is we will finish off his... Oh no, we can't recruit on the first turn.
I answer your request.
I think we're ready to end the turn there then, really. Right, yeah, so... Actually, no, we're not. We need to look at the map and look at what kind of borders we have. So, we've got Yingshao here, and we've got Zhao Hunan here, and Tupan there. Now, if we look at wars, we are at war with Zhao Huan, Yingshao, and Tupan. We basically have enemies all over. These are fairly weak factions though, so we don't need to worry too much about them. The tribes will become very strong, and when you fight the tribes you get a debuff which reduces your units to a very tired state, hurts their strength and their morale, their speed and their morale, which especially when cavalry is the main advantage that you have over the tribes, can be very difficult. What we notice immediately is that we have a lot of food and he doesn't have any, so what we'll do
The honor is mine.
send him 1 food per turn, and we will request a payment from him just to get something back, really. But the idea behind this is to basically just keep him sweet so that he doesn't attack us in the early game.
This
Because
signals
we need
great
to
things.
ensure that we take care of these borders and these enemies before we're dealing with these. He's probably going to attack them anyway because the tribes tend to war with each other, so we probably don't need to worry too much about them. But the reason for essentially making sure that this sentinel has a full retinue before we put him in there is to ensure that this garrison is bolstered by his troops. So, we can't recruit this turn.
Corruption.
We will see if we've got a trade deal. So you can go into Quick Deal and look for a trade agreement. This will tell you who is willing to give you one and who might give you one if you offer them the right things. For now, we will just do trade with the Han Empire. It's usually best to actually negotiate these things
Greetings.
rather than
Well
let
met.
the computer do it for you, because you tend to get a little bit more bang for your buck that way. He's not going to give us much, but that's fine. The main objective is just getting the trade deal. You'll see here, this will say proposed deal. At the minute it's at 0 and it's green, which means he's happy with it, he'll accept it. He'll give us 130 gold and a trade agreement. If we asked him for a little bit more gold, that would then change to 0.1 and he wouldn't be happy, he would reject the offer. So we'll accept that trade deal straight away. You see the
approve
income increase, we've got the payment from him. This is telling you how many commanderies you own, and this is telling you your food and your trade your trade influence, as we mentioned on the previous screen. This is a list of factions that you know, so until you discover a faction, they won't actually appear here. And I think that's pretty much everything. We may be able to we may be able to get rid of him via marriage and get something back for him. It's worth looking at.
You wish to speak?
Actually, he might want to trade. Trading with Dong Zhuo is dangerous in the other game because he tends to be hated by everyone, and if his territory is, particularly his capital, is taken by somebody else, or there's a disruption in the supply line, that will stop your trade, and if you're depending on that to essentially fund your armies, it can be pretty unreliable and hurt you in the long term. So we'll send her on an assignment. Because I think I'm going to get rid of Zhang Min, but we'll see. And we will take our first move, which will bring us over here.
Toward glory.
And then we will end the turn there. Okay. So, just to give you some insight on what happens when you end turn, the game basically cycles through the number of different factions, and they take their turns, they make their moves, similar to what we just did. I skipped it out just because it can be quite lengthy, especially at the beginning, when you don't have, where you've got a lot of factions, and really just to try and reduce the length of the video a little bit. Now, we essentially are moving towards this guy's commandery, or his city. We're going to try and solidify this border first. It's he's the biggest of the three threats. He's also closest to our our territory. It's feasible that he could just come in here and start wreaking havoc among all of our settlements. Now, we are still slightly concerned about this here, but the good news is we can now recruit some soldiers on turn 2. So because he's a sentinel, he gets access to these fairly good purple units, which are mainly melee infantry. You'll usually find axes. Here we've got a Zamajan infantry, which are very good actually. They've got splash attacks and things like that. We will go into the units in a little bit more depth when we construct the first army. But for now, we're going to take 2 of them. We're also going to replace, just to give you an idea of how I did that. Essentially, when you click on a unit, you can swap unit using this function here. That will bring up the available units to this particular type of general. And you can swap it, which gives you a reduction. If you look at the ones that we recruited from new, there are 25 soldiers in that group, whereas these are at 103. It's still not full. The full unit will be 120 because we are playing on medium unit sizes. This is adjustable in the game settings. However, although it may seem brilliant to put the largest possible unit size and have these immense battles, I do find that as you get into the later game and the battles get bigger and bigger with more troops, you do find that it hinders performance quite significantly, especially if you're recording or streaming or something like that at the same time. So for now, we are going to be doing it on medium units. The battles are still sufficiently large for you to feel like it's not just a skirmish in a field, but it doesn't hinder performance to an extreme degree. Now, we've swapped those out. I am also going to give him... Oh, we don't have enough money. Right, so I would like to swap them out for some Zamajan infantry, but as we don't have enough money for that, I think we're happy with this retinue for the time being. It's they're more than sufficient for this particular point in the game. Now, you can keep this administrator in your army if you'd like. He will obviously make your army a lot stronger because you've essentially got 3 generals with 3 retinues as opposed to 2 or 1. However, I am going to use this function here, which is to recall the selected retinue. Now, when you do that, in fact, what we're going to be able to do, when you recall the retinue, you stop paying their upkeep. Now, we only have 203 gold, and we have 123 coming in, so the Jamajan infantry. I'm almost certain I'm saying that wrong, but that's the best I can do for now. So this infantry will obviously push us over that limit. However, since we're not going to be paying an upkeep cost, we may be able to get enough money from one of the other factions to allow us to recruit them. Now, they are 760 per unit, so we're going to need about 1,800 to make sure that we can get two. The Han Empire start off fairly rich. They will get richer as this goes on.
Greetings. Well met.
So we'll see if we can give them... actually, do we know any other tribes? Yes, we do. So, as I've said with Mulu, we started giving him food to try and keep him sweet. We got a little bit of gold for it. We will do the same with Lady Giron, who is currently positive towards us. We will go into diplomacy in more depth later on. And we'll take some gold from her to give her this food tribute, essentially. We want her to agree with it. You can as well, because of the way percentages work, just keep minusing and plussing this, and it will eventually go to a figure that is the most you can get from the deal while she still finds it acceptable. This also shows you the positive factors and negative factors. Again, we will cover that in a bit more depth in terms of how you do deals with other factions. So we get 242 gold, and we give her 1 food for 10 turns. So we'll propose that deal. And we've now got 445 gold in the Treasury, and we're going to do the same with Somaka.
Well met, friend.
Give him 1 food and request a payment to go along with it. Now, this is useful both for getting the payments yourself, for getting the gold in your treasury, and also for, like I say, just trying to stop them from attacking you, really. You may not have to worry about this too much on the lower scale difficulties, but with anywhere up from hard, the AI becomes very aggressive in terms of its expansion. So we're going to give him food as well.
Not to seize this.
Yes, it would. We've got 683. I am going to check and see if we can do another trade agreement. Yes, so Dieu. Or is that Dieu? I think that's so Dieu. I'm almost certain I'm going to butcher every single pronunciation in this, but I will do my best. So so Dieu, he wants to trade with us. So we'll go into negotiation. We'll find him. There he is.
Let us discuss
and
terms.
yep, we will do a trade agreement. Now he's plus 2.5. That means he really wants this. Well, he wants this deal significantly enough to pay for it, probably. So we'll take some money from him as well. Now that will not only bolster our treasury this turn, so we may be able to recruit those Jimajan infantry, but it will also give us more incoming gold next turn.
As they fight side by side, your generals' bonds will deepen as friends or rivals, affecting their satisfaction in your service. Be watchful of their relationships and their characteristics as they develop.
Yeah, so that's thank you, advisor. That is essentially related to the ticks and crosses that you'll get from various traits. This is why it's usually best to try and keep characters who like each other around each other, beside each other in the same army. It will also affect if you've got a administrator. If somebody in this army doesn't like the administrator, then they may also take a satisfaction hit or have some kind of debuff from that. It's not essential to have everyone liking each other. You can manage an effective army when people don't like each other, but generally speaking it is best to try and make sure that everyone's getting along just fine, and you'll get more buffs in the long term doing it that way. So we've got 402 coming in next turn, and we've got 951 currently in the treasury. I don't think there was another trade agreement we could... Yeah, there's Dongzhuo, but again, if you trade with him early on, he's got so many enemies and he's going to lose territory hand over fist. It's probably not worth it. To kind of explain what I mean by that, if, for example, there was a trade route that got severed because Sir Jie lost part of his territory or all of his territory, then that trade agreement would have a no entry sign over it, and it would basically be defunct. It wouldn't add to our income until the territory is regained by him or another trade route is established. what it also means is if I try to cancel that within 10 turns of actually signing the agreement with him, it will affect my trustworthiness. So the sorry about that. The trustworthiness basically governs how willing other factions will be to do deals with you. Again, we will do more in diplomacy, but that's the basics of why we aren't necessarily keen to sign a trade deal with Dongzhuo just yet. So we still need a little bit extra money. We need roughly about 900 more. We can see if anyone would like a non-aggression pact. Yes, the Han Empire would. We'll see how much they would like a non-aggression pact.
Well met.
Not enough to pay for it. They do want it, but if we go to ask them for a payment, that will immediately change to them not particularly wanting this deal. So we're going to have to try and do this by other means.
Welcome, friend.
We will see if we got anything they might like. Now, you can't trade ancillaries that generals have got equipped, which is why these are grayed out. I think we will... That's not a particularly good set of armor. I mean, it's better than nothing, but we're not using it right now. It's bronze, so that's given us a 2.2 favorability towards him for the deal. He will pay for that, and because he's rich, he will pay more than a faction who isn't as rich, basically. I still don't think we're quite going to get enough. Yeah, we're not. So let's
we take this
sell
as a
that.
token of friendship.
Of course, it's not essential
to
to recruit these units on turn 1, but I just tend to like doing it, and I'll explain why when we're able to. Unfortunately, we're probably going to have to sell them that as well, and I would really prefer not to. Now that's 3.3. We probably would have got away with just selling them this one, to be honest, but never mind. You can always acquire these ancillaries again, or the versions of them later on. Right, he is going to give us 870 for that. That's fine.
May your fortunes multiply.
Yes, thank you. So we now have 2,266 and 402 coming in, and we can get the Jamajan infantry swapped out for those axes. Now, the main reason I wanted those pretty decent units, the decent mid-game units, and you can even use them to some extent in the end game. The reason I wanted them is because we're going to recall the selected retinue. Yep. And what that will do is, first of all, remove that army's upkeep, or that retinue's upkeep, from our ongoing costs, or our expected income for next turn. And it will also, next turn, put that sentinel, or that general, in the garrison with these guys. Now, it's very useful to have a general in there with some decent troops, because obviously we only have one army at the minute, and we've got him, who's pretty hostile towards us, and we've also got him, who is unpredictable. He could just declare war at any moment. This is our capital. If this gets lost or put under siege, it will disrupt our trade agreements, as well as all of the income that we get from it, so it would be fairly disastrous. Having this garrison in here with the sentinel will help us, at least in the early game, to defend this if it gets attacked. And we don't really need any more troops than what we've already got to take him on. You can click on his city, and this little icon here will show you the garrison. He's only got a few soldiers in his garrison, a couple of archers, G infantry, not very good, or G militia even, and G infantry captain, bit better but still not great. Obviously he has his current army, more archers with a strategist, a vanguard, and 2 lots of cavalry. Now, I would like to replace these with archers, because they give you access to fire arrows, which crossbows cannot do. But we don't really have a lot of money to play with just yet. This champion, can he get... Yeah, he can get these spear guards. Now, these guys are very useful, because they will allow you to use a turtle formation if you've got a strategist in your army. So we're going to get one of them. It's all we can afford for the time being, but we can't actually get to him in this turn anyway. This shaded area of black is how far you can move in a given turn. If you hold down the shift key and the left mouse button, you can drag the arrow essentially to wherever you like, and it'll tell you if you go over that boundary, it's going to take you 2 turns. If you keep going, it'll tell you it's going to take 3 and 4 and so on. That's turned red there when we went in because it's enemy territory essentially. So you can you've got all of this area here where you can move to within a single turn, and if you right click where you want the army to go, they'll essentially go there. The shift function is useful just for seeing whether you can get to a particular place in one turn or not. Not particularly useful for this particular situation, but it's a very useful function later on when you need to plan your defences and attacks a bit more carefully. So we've got these spearmen now. We've only got 25, but that's fine. They will be given a chance to replenish. And we've got a decent amount of income coming in now that we've taken him out and put him in there. And we can now end this turn after we take this move, so we'll get a little bit closer. We do want to stay. If you look at this, we can get into his territory, but we want to stay on our side for the time being. We can only just get over the border, and if we stay in our territory, we will have this plus, which has given us a replenishment, which is what we want for these guys, to have as many units as possible in their group before we start the battle. So we're gonna end the turn there, and we will quickly show the administrator next turn, and I think that's going to be about it for this part one. Right, so we are now on turn 3. Still in 190, but now we're in winter. As you can see, the environment has changed a little bit. It is considerably colder, though because we're in the south, we're not going to be subject to a lot of snow or anything like that. These pop-ups after the turn will basically tell you what the AI has done. So we can see that Lady Zhurong has declared war on Ahunan. That's lovely. It'll keep her busy and stop her from coming after me. We will cover this in the next video. For the time being, what we want to focus on is, first of all, the administrator that we've placed in Jiaozi. You can see here we've got a building slot as well. Again, we'll cover that in the next one. But the administrator is now in that garrison, so we've got a little bit of extra protection if he decides to declare war and come from the west, or he decides to attack us from the south, or I guess the southwest. It just means we've got a little bit of extra protection, as well as the walls and towers that are already in this city to begin with. So that should be enough to protect our capital, and this army should be enough to take them out. You can see there the balance of power is quite, well, it's fairly it's decently in the green. It's basically going to expect that we get a Pyrrhic victory or whatever the case may be. I expect we'll get at least a close victory or decisive, but that and the battle tutorial will be in the next episode. Thank you very much. Thanks again for watching. If you found the video to be enjoyable or informative, please remember to hit the like button, and if you want to see more of this kind of content, please subscribe. As always, you're welcome to join me on Twitch for regular Total War 3 Kingdoms live streams, usually starting around 9 PM UK time. The link to my Twitch channel will be in the description. Thanks again.